I had my keys in the door of my new house when a white Audi slammed to a stop behind me. A woman in a crisp blazer stepped out, pointed at me, and said, "You can't live here. The HOA didn't approve you." I laughed, until she actually called the police. When I tell people this story, most of them assume I'm exaggerating. They think I'm adding spice for drama or padding the details to make it sound better. But every word you're about to hear is exactly how it unfolded, starting with the moment I set foot on the property I inherited from my Uncle Walt. It was just past noon when my wife, Emily, leaned forward in the passenger seat and whispered, "Lucas, it's even prettier than I remembered." I had to agree. The road curved gently up the hillside, the kind of slow bend that lets you take in the whole scene. The tall pines at the edge of the lot swayed in the breeze, and sunlight broke through in soft golden strips across the old porch. The house wasn't fancy, 2 stories, wood siding, plenty of age on it, but it was solid, honest, a home that felt lived in, even after sitting empty. Our son Caleb was the first one out of the car. He jumped down with the excitement only an 8-year-old can manage and yelled, "Dibs on the room with the big window!" Emily laughed, shaking her head the way she always does when he gets ahead of himself. "Let your father open the place first, sweetheart." I stepped up to the front door with the key I'd been carrying around in my pocket for almost 2 months, long enough to imagine this moment 100 different ways. I checked the paperwork again out of habit, probate documents, the tax parcel map showing clearly that the land sat outside any subdivision, and the title confirming what I already knew. This wasn't just a house, it was freedom. No HOA, no rules committee, no community standards. Just our family, a piece of land, and the life we planned to build on it. I put the key into the door, and that's when everything changed. A sharp screech of tires cut through the quiet. I turned around just in time to see a white Audi glide to a stop behind our moving truck, blocking the driveway like it owned the place. The door opened, and out stepped a woman in a pale blue blazer, heels clicking across the gravel. The way she moved, it was like someone stepping onto a stage, already expecting applause. 2 men climbed out after her, broad shoulders, matching polo shirts, and the words Silver Horizon Estates HOA Compliance Division stitched across their chests, the kind of coordinated uniforms that tried a little too hard to look official. The woman planted herself between me and my own driveway and called out, "Excuse me, you can't be here without clearance." I blinked, thinking she was lost. "I live here," I said, "or I'm about to. My name's Lucas Wright." She frowned like the very syllables offended her. "This property falls under the jurisdiction of the Silver Horizon Estates HOA. All move-ins must be pre-approved." Behind me, I heard Emily step closer. "Lucas, what is she talking about?" I held up my folder. "This lot isn't part of any HOA. It never has been. County zoning confirms it. But the woman, who would later introduce herself as Karen Aldridge, didn't even look at my documents." "That may have been true once," she said, "but we updated the boundaries in 23. This parcel is now within our authority." I let out a breath and tried not to laugh. "Ma'am, you can't just redraw landlines because you feel like it." Her smile tightened. One of the compliance officers stepped forward, puffing his chest, and said, "We'll need to inspect the premises immediately." Emily put a hand on my arm. Even Caleb had gone quiet. "No," I said firmly. "You're trespassing. This is private property." Karen's eyes narrowed with a cold, rehearsed confidence. "Then I'll call the police," she said. "Let them sort it out." And with that, the first stone of a much larger avalanche began to roll. I watched Karen Aldridge pull out her phone like she was drawing a weapon she'd been waiting all day to use. Her fingers moved fast, practiced, confident, too confident. Emily stepped beside me, her voice low. "Lucas, is she serious?" "Oh, she's serious," I whispered back. "And she has no idea she's wrong." Or at least, that's what I thought at the time. Karen didn't bother speaking quietly. She wanted us to hear every word. "Yes, hello. This is the HOA president for Silver Horizon Estates. I need officers dispatched to my location immediately. We have an unlawful occupancy." Unlawful? Occupation? You'd think I'd stormed Fort Knox. I crossed my arms, leaned against the porch post, and let out a slow breath. Unbelievable. The 2 compliance officers spread out a little, one drifting toward the front corner of the house, the other toward the side yard, as if they were assessing a crime scene. Their polos stretched tight across their shoulders, and both wore the same clipped expression, half boredom, half authority fantasy. I stepped forward. "Hey, don't go wandering around my property. You have no right to be here." The taller one stopped, turned his head just enough to let me know he'd heard me, but not enough to acknowledge I existed. Karen snapped her fingers sharply. "Gentlemen, stay within visual range. Visual range, not a phrase normal people use." Then she turned her attention back to me with a professional, smile meets predator look. "Mr. Wright, the sooner you understand how our community operates, the smoother this transition will go." "There is no community," I said evenly. "Not here, not this house. I checked the records myself." "Oh, I'm aware," she replied, adjusting the sleeve of her blazer. "But the board voted to update our jurisdictional boundaries in late '23. This lot became part of Silver Horizon shortly after." Emily spoke up, trying to keep her voice calm. "Our realtor said this home wasn't part of an HOA. The title search came back clean." Karen gave her a pitying smile. "That's because the old boundaries were still on file. It takes time for county databases to update. Bureaucracy is slow." I stared at her. "So, let me get this straight. You're saying your HOA simply expanded beyond its development, onto private land, without notifying the owner?" She nodded like a teacher rewarding a student for catching up. "We do what's necessary to maintain standards." There it was, that word again. Standards, a beautiful word when used for craftsmanship or personal character. A terrifying one when used by someone like her. I opened my binder and pulled out the tax parcel map, printed in color, stamped by the county recorder's office. "These are the official lines," I said, "and they have not changed." She didn't even glance at the papers. "That map is outdated." "No," I said, controlling my voice. "It's the one the county uses right now." Karen gave a small, dismissive shrug. "We'll let law enforcement sort it out." Behind us, Caleb tugged lightly on Emily's sleeve. "Mom, what's happening?" Emily knelt and put an arm around him. "It's okay, baby. Dad's just talking to some people." But her eyes told me she didn't believe that. Not for a second. The taller compliance officer suddenly spoke. "Mrs. Aldridge, do you want us to begin the preliminary exterior review?" Karen nodded once. "Yes. Document any nonconformities. We'll need a full report." I stepped between them. "No one is reviewing anything, not 1 inch. This is private land." Karen rolled her eyes, and it wasn't a small gesture. It was the kind of eye roll you could see from a mile away. "Mr. Wright," she sighed, "you're only making this harder. For who? For you." Just then, the distant hum of an engine echoed up the driveway, growing louder as 2 sheriff's cruisers came into view. Blue and red lights flickered against the tree trunks. Karen straightened her blazer, lifted her chin, and smiled like a queen welcoming her loyal guards. And as the cruisers rolled to a stop, I thought to myself, this is either going to be cleared up in 1 minute, or it's about to become the worst moving day in American history. When the 2 sheriff's cruisers pulled up, I felt something inside me loosen just a little. Not relief, just hope. Hope that maybe, finally, somebody with real authority could put an end to whatever performance Karen Aldridge thought she was starring in. The first officer out of the vehicle was a man in his late 40s. Solid build, calm posture, the kind of face that had seen too many neighborhood disputes to be impressed by anything anymore. His partner, younger and slimmer, hung back a few steps, already scanning the property with a practiced eye. Karen marched toward them like she was welcoming backup troops. "Officers," she said brightly, "thank you for responding so quickly. This man," she pointed at me without looking, "and his family are attempting to unlawfully occupy protected HOA property." The older officer took off his sunglasses and gave her a slow, patient blink. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to take a breath and start from the beginning." Karen didn't breathe. She launched straight into a speech. "This parcel is under the jurisdiction of the Silver Horizon Estates Homeowners Association. These people moved in without board approval. We require all occupants to undergo compliance orientation before," I stepped forward. "Officer, none of that is true. This isn't part of any HOA. I have the documents right here." He turned to me, hands resting calmly on his duty belt. "All right, let's see what you've got." I opened my binder, the same one I'd double-checked in the car before we even pulled up the driveway. Probate transfer, title deed, zoning confirmation, county parcel map with the boundaries circled in red. The officer leafed through everything carefully, not rushed, not dismissive, just thorough, like a man who preferred facts over theatrics. Behind me, I heard Caleb whisper to Emily, "Mom, are we in trouble?" She wrapped her arms around him. "No, sweetheart, we're okay. Dad's just talking." But her voice had that tight edge to it, the one she used when she was trying not to show fear. After a long moment, the officer closed the folder and nodded. "Mr. Wright, these documents look in order." Karen's mouth fell open like someone unplugged her speech processor. "What do you mean, look in order?" she demanded. "Our updated jurisdiction map." She thrust her glossy binder toward the officer. He didn't take it. Instead, he said the words that changed the entire tone of the encounter. "Ma'am, HOA policies don't override county zoning. If the county says this home isn't part of your HOA, then it's not." Karen's cheeks flushed, but she forced a smile that could have cut glass. "You mean to tell me you refuse to enforce?" "We're not refusing anything," the officer said evenly. "But what we have here is a civil dispute, not a criminal one. We don't handle those." I felt my stomach drop. "Wait," I said. "So, if she comes back tomorrow, or next week, or whenever she wants, that's a civil matter too," the officer said. "You'll need to work it out through the courts." Courts, as in lawyers, hearings, piles of paperwork, months of stress. And Karen heard it all, loud and clear. Her smile grew slow and poisonous. "Well," she said, "thank you for confirming that." The younger deputy finally spoke up. "If either party escalates, damages property, threatens anyone, then it becomes our problem. Until then, you'll need to resolve this yourselves." He wasn't rude, just matter of fact. But every syllable felt like another brick dropping on my shoulders. Karen folded her arms with a victorious little shrug. "Officers, appreciate your time," she chirped, already turning back toward her Audi. "You've been very helpful." The deputies gave me a sympathetic look. The older one even leaned in slightly and lowered his voice. "Keep records," he said. "Everything. Dates, photos, videos, conversations, just in case this goes further." That was the moment I realized he didn't think this was over, not by a long shot. Emily squeezed my hand gently. "Lucas, what do we do now?" I watched Karen step into her Audi, the compliance officers climbing in behind her. Her engine revved once, sharp and triumphant, before she pulled away. I exhaled slowly. "I don't know," I said, "but whatever she thinks she's starting, she has no idea who she's dealing with." But the truth was, I wasn't so sure either, and I had no idea just how far she was willing to go. That first night should have been peaceful. We'd finally moved enough boxes inside to make the house feel halfway livable. Emily made sandwiches for dinner, Caleb fell asleep on a pile of blankets in the living room, and for a few hours, the world went quiet again. But just before 9 o'clock, something felt wrong. Not loud, not obvious, just wrong. A stillness settled over the property, the kind that presses against the windows like a held breath. Even the wind seemed to stop moving. I stepped out onto the porch, listening. And that's when I saw it. A pair of headlights paused at the edge of the road, not approaching, not leaving, just sitting there, idling, watching. At first I thought it was someone lost, checking a GPS, but the car didn't move, didn't even inch forward or backward. It just hovered like a question no one wanted to answer. I slipped my phone out and quietly started recording. A simple precaution, I told myself. Then the car pulled away, slowly, deliberately, like whoever was inside wanted me to see them leave. When I stepped back inside, Emily was waiting at the door. "Was that her?" she whispered. I didn't want to assume, but I also didn't want to lie. "I don't know," I said, "but I'm not liking the timing." She bit her lip, glancing toward the living room, where Caleb slept curled under a blanket decorated with little blue rockets. "I don't want him to be afraid." "He won't be," I said, though I wasn't entirely convinced myself. "He won't even know anything happened. But kids always know. They always feel when the air changes." An hour later, after Emily and Caleb were asleep, I went outside again, this time with a small flashlight and the quiet determination of someone who needs answers, even if he doesn't like what he'll find. I walked along the fence line, nothing damaged, nothing stolen. But something was wrong. a laminated sign zip-tied to one of the trees. Temporary Community Oversight Zone violators subject to fines. HOA letterhead. Karen's signature at the bottom. I stared at it, trying to understand the logic, if there was any logic at all. This wasn't a warning. It wasn't even a threat. It was a declaration, a marker, a claim, a territorial flag in a war I didn't know we were already fighting. I ripped the sign down, not out of anger, but because leaving it up felt like surrendering something I wasn't ready to give away. The next morning, things got worse. I opened the mailbox expecting the usual stack of official papers, mortgage documents, change of address confirmations, school enrollment forms for Caleb. Instead, the mailbox was empty, completely empty, not a scrap of junk mail, not even a grocery flyer. I frowned and checked the hinge. Everything seemed fine. Emily came down the driveway holding her coffee mug like she needed it for courage. "You expecting mail today?" she asked. "Yes, quite a bit," she hesitated, because I heard the mail truck stop across the street and then drive right past us. That wasn't right. Our address was correct in every system, every database. We double-checked everything. I went inside, sat at the kitchen table, and called the local post office. After 10 minutes of transfers, a tired voice finally admitted, "Sir, according to our system, you filed a forwarding request to the Silver Horizon Estates HOA office." My pulse froze mid-beat. "I didn't file that," I said. "I want it removed, immediately." "We can flag it," the woman said carefully, "but you'll need to come in person to file a report." I thanked her, hung up, and realized my hands were trembling slightly. She was still coming at us, quietly, strategically. Without leaving fingerprints, just enough interference to disrupt our lives, but not enough to trigger a criminal charge. I stepped outside again. The morning sun lit up the hills beautifully, as if nothing were wrong, but the air felt tense, unsettled. Emily joined me on the porch, arms wrapped around herself. "Lucas," she said softly, "she's not going to stop, is she?" I shook my head. "No, I don't think she's even started." The next morning, I woke to the low rumble of diesel engines, heavy, steady, unmistakable, the kind of sound that doesn't belong on a quiet hillside. For a moment, I thought maybe it was a delivery truck, or maybe the neighbor's tractor, but the moment I stepped outside, all doubt vanished. Two concrete barriers, each the size of a small car, were sitting squarely across my driveway, thick, gray, industrial, the kind of blocks used to close highways during construction. Spray painted in bright orange across both barriers were the words, "No trespassing, HOA access only." It took my brain a moment to register what I was looking at. Not a prank, not a mistake, a message, a loud, unmissable message. Behind me, the screen door creaked open. Emily stepped out slowly, robe pulled tight around her shoulders. She whispered, "Oh my God." And I don't know why, but I suddenly felt embarrassed, like I had failed to protect her, failed to protect Caleb, and failed even before the real fight had begun. I walked up to the barrier and ran my hand across the cold concrete. The spray paint was still fresh. My fingers picked up a little dust of orange. "Lucas," Emily said again, softer this time, "what is she doing? What is she trying to prove?" "I don't know," I said, "but she wants us to think she's in control." I could feel anger gathering low in my chest like a slow burn, but I forced myself to breathe. Older men in my family used to warn me, never let fury make the first move. Reason gives you more leverage. And I needed every inch of leverage I could get. I pulled out my phone and began recording, not with the frantic energy of someone trying to make a scene, but with the quiet, deliberate calm of someone building a record for the sheriff, a record for a judge, a record for whoever would have to clean up this mess later. I spoke clearly into the microphone. "This is my driveway. These blocks were not authorized. This is unauthorized obstruction by the Silver Horizon Estates HOA. Emily stood close behind me. I knew she didn't want to be on camera, but she stayed anyway, because she understood why I was doing it. If the police weren't willing to protect us yet, I needed the public to. I called a towing company. The dispatcher hesitated when I explained the situation. "This a neighborhood dispute, sir? HOA stuff?" "Yes," I said. "But these barriers are on my property. I need them removed." "Well, we can send someone, but you'll have to sign liability waivers. All of them." I signed every waiver. Small price to pay for reclaiming my own land. It took nearly an hour for the tow truck to arrive, and when it did, the driver, an older man with a heavy mustache, gave me a long, knowing look. He didn't say it, but I could tell. He'd seen this sort of nonsense before. "All right," he said, slapping the side of his truck. "Let's get these damn things out of your way." I kept recording as he hooked chains around the first barrier. The metal screeched and groaned. Concrete scraped against gravel. It sounded like someone dragging a tombstone across the earth. The whole time I scanned the road, half expecting Karen's Audi to appear like a bad omen. But she didn't show. Not yet. By the time we rolled the blocks down the hill and left them on public land, where they legally belonged, I had nearly 20 minutes of video. I uploaded the footage to my social media account. Not with a dramatic caption, not with a rant, just a simple sentence. This is what happens when an HOA thinks it owns your land. I didn't expect much from it, maybe a few comments from friends, maybe a handful of people saying, "Wow, that's crazy." But within an hour, the video had 5,000 views. By lunchtime, 20,000. By evening, 50,000. The comments poured in. "This is insane. That's illegal. What HOA is this? They've lost their minds. Dude, lawyer up now. Post everything. You need proof." And for the first time since this mess started, I didn't feel alone. Emily watched the numbers climb from over my shoulder. She wasn't big on social media, but even she understood the significance. "You think this will help?" she asked quietly. "I don't know," I said truthfully, "but at least people are seeing what's happening." She took my hand. "Good, because I have a feeling she isn't finished." I looked down the hill toward the winding road. "No," I murmured. "She's just getting started." By the end of that week, I'd learned something important. Silence was never really silent out here. Even when the wind stopped, even when the house settled into its old wooden frame, even when the world around us seemed still, I could feel the tension humming beneath it all, like a storm gathering itself far off in the distance. And that storm came walking right up to my fence line one evening, disguised as a nervous young man in a hoodie. I was on the porch, sipping coffee that had long gone cold, replaying the events of the past few days in my head, the concrete barriers, the mailbox tampering, the late-night surveillance. I kept wondering where the next blow would come from. Then I saw someone standing near the mailbox at the edge of the driveway, not approaching the house, not calling out, just waiting. At first I assumed it was another nosy neighbor or one of Karen's so-called compliance officers doing their evening rounds. But the figure wasn't broad-shouldered like them. And instead of a polo shirt, there was a worn gray hoodie pulled over a head that seemed uneasy. I set down my mug and walked toward him, keeping my voice steady. "Can I help you?" The man stepped forward, hands raised slightly like he wanted to show he wasn't a threat. "Mr. Wright? Lucas Wright?" "Yes," I said cautiously. "Who are you?" He pushed the hood back, revealing a young face, maybe late 20s, with tired eyes and a guilty expression that didn't seem to belong to someone who enjoyed causing trouble. "My name's Ethan," he said. "Ethan? Well, technically I guess I'm still Ethan from the HOA. Then he added quickly, "But I'm not here on their behalf." I didn't say anything, just waited. Ethan looked around like someone might be listening from the trees. "Can we talk? Somewhere not so out in the open?" I hesitated for half a heartbeat, then nodded toward the porch. When we sat down, he didn't waste time. "I need to get something off my chest," he began. "And I need to do it before she drags more people into this." "By she," I said, "I assume you mean Karen." He nodded vigorously. "Yes, Mrs. Aldridge, Karen, whatever she calls herself these days." He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a small USB drive, and placed it carefully on the table between us, like it was something fragile that could explode if dropped. "What's this?" I asked. "Everything," he whispered. "Or, at least enough." He took a slow breath before continuing. "Listen, Mr. Wright, I didn't sign up for this. I joined the HOA because I needed steady work. Fixing sidewalks, checking storm drains, walking dogs for older neighbors. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. And Karen, well, she wasn't always like this." He paused, shaking his head. "But the power got to her, the authority. And when she got the idea of expanding jurisdiction, everything changed." I leaned forward. "Tell me exactly what she did." Ethan swallowed. "She made us sign a new boundary map, one she created. Not the county, not the developers, her. She said it was for order and community integrity, but when I hesitated, she threatened to write me up for insubordination. Said she had the board wrapped around her finger. If I didn't sign, she'd make sure I never worked in property management again. Emily stepped quietly onto the porch, wrapping Caleb's blanket around her shoulders. She didn't interrupt. She just listened, eyes drifting between Ethan and me. Ethan continued, voice trembling slightly. That USB, it has more than emails, more than the fake map. It has a recording. Recording of what? Emily asked softly. Ethan looked at her, then back at me. A closed-door meeting from last week. His voice dropped. I wasn't supposed to hear it, but I left my phone charging in the meeting room, and it recorded everything. He pushed the USB closer. You need to listen to it, but not around your son. She wasn't just planning to make your life difficult. She was planning to bury you alive in violations. Her exact words were, he paused, collecting himself. If the law won't handle him, we'll bury him under a mountain of citations until he begs to leave. Emily inhaled sharply. Caleb, thankfully, was asleep inside. I stared at the tiny USB drive, a piece of plastic no bigger than my thumb, and realized it might be the single most important object in my entire life at that moment. Ethan's shoulders sagged, as if saying the words took something out of him. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I didn't know how far she'd go until I heard that meeting. And when I saw the concrete barriers, when she started messing with your mail, I knew she wasn't going to stop. He stood, stuffing his hands into his pockets. I can't help her anymore, and I can't stay silent. I don't want to be part of destroying someone's home or someone's family. I stood up as well. Ethan, I said, you did the right thing coming here. He nodded once, stepping backward down the porch steps. Be careful, Mr. Wright, he said. Karen isn't playing a game. She thinks she's keeping order, and she'll do anything to protect that illusion. Then he turned and disappeared into the dusk. I picked up the USB and closed my fingers around it. A small, cold weight. A smoking gun. And I knew, from this moment on, whatever happened next wouldn't just be about property lines or HOA rules. It was about exposing a truth someone very powerful did not want the world to see. I don't remember the exact moment I woke up that morning. What I do remember is the sound. Chainsaws, plural. Not the distant hum of a neighbor trimming a tree, but the violent, ripping roar of 3 or 4 saws cutting through something thick, something close. Emily shot up right beside me, clutching the blanket like it was the only solid thing in the world. What is that? She whispered. But I already knew. I didn't answer. I was out of bed before my feet fully hit the floor. The moment I opened the front door, the world snapped into a nightmare I wasn't prepared for. There were men, actual crews, in neon work vests scattered across my yard like an invading force. One man was sawing straight through the lilac hedge my uncle planted 30 years ago. Another was uprooting the pathway lights with a shovel, ripping them out like weeds. 2 more stood beside a white pickup truck, plastered with decals that read, Silver Horizon Improvement Team. HOA branding, official looking, calculated. I jumped off the porch steps so fast I nearly tripped. Hey! Get off my property! For a moment, no one reacted. The chainsaws drowned everything out. Then one man turned, lifting his visor. HOA renovation order, he shouted over the noise. We're bringing the property up to community standards. My voice cracked with anger. This property isn't in your community. He didn't even blink. We were told it is. And we have permission. Permission from who? He pointed behind me. I turned, and there she was. Karen Aldridge, standing next to her black Lexus like a general surveying a battlefield she already believed she owned. Big sunglasses, perfect blazer, a smug smile so confident it made my stomach twist. She didn't shout. Her voice carried in that cold, calm way only certain people can pull off. Good morning, Mr. Wright. I hope you're ready for the upgrades. Upgrades? I said, stunned. You're destroying my property. We're correcting nonconformities, she replied pleasantly. The board approved light gray paint for the porch, and we're redoing the lawn to match HOA-compliant turf. Think of it as an investment. I stepped toward her, pointing at the ruined hedge. You forged documents, redrew boundaries, tampered with my mail. Allegedly, she cut in. You keep forgetting that word. Behind me, a sharp crack sounded, wood splintering. I turned just in time to see the old garden gazebo collapse as two workers finished sawing through the remaining supports. My chest tightened. That gazebo was one of the last things my uncle had built before he passed. Emily screamed from the porch, "Lucas, they're coming toward the house!" Caleb stood behind her, holding onto her legs, wide-eyed, silently terrified. That broke something inside me. I stormed toward the workers, but the two HOA compliance officers, the same men from her earlier visit, jumped in front of me. One placed a hand on the butt of something on his belt, not a gun, maybe a stun device or baton. "Sir, step back," he said. "HOA has temporary oversight." "Temporary what?" Karen clasped her hands behind her back like she was discussing afternoon tea. "Emergency community integrity provisions," she said, quoting nonsense she clearly made up. "We can take corrective action while we review your suitability." Suitability? Like I was applying for citizenship in her personal kingdom. Emily shouted from the porch again, voice shaking. "Lucas, please, call the police!" I did. They arrived in 20 minutes, and when they stepped out of their cruisers, I saw something shift in their faces. Not surprise, not outrage, but resignation. The older deputy raised both hands. "Everyone stop, now!" The workers actually complied, maybe because they thought law enforcement would side with Karen again. The officer walked the length of my destroyed pathway, surveying the damage slowly, methodically. I watched his jaw tighten. He turned to Karen. "Ma'am, do you have any legal authorization for this?" Karen held up her binder, the one she used like a holy script. "As I explained before, officers, this property falls under—" He cut her off. "And as we explained before, HOA guidelines do not override county zoning." "Then file a notice," Karen snapped. "But until the dispute is resolved, we are maintaining community standards." The deputy sighed, a heavy, defeated sound. "Mr. Wright," he said quietly, "we'll take statements and document everything. But this is still a civil dispute. We can't arrest them for property damage unless a judge rules." "Civil?" Emily cried out. "They nearly cut into the porch. They scared our son half to death." The younger deputy placed a sympathetic hand on his belt. "We'll write it all up," he said softly, "but you'll need to go through the courts." Karen smiled again, that same slow, poisonous smile. The workers packed up, loading the saws into the truck. They didn't look sorry. They didn't look proud either. Just tired men doing a job for someone who controlled their paychecks. When the last engine faded down the hill, I looked at my yard. Destroyed, trampled, defaced. Emily was crying quietly. Caleb clung to her shirt, his face buried in her side. I knelt down beside them. "It's okay," I whispered. "I'm here, and I'm not letting her get away with this." Inside my chest, something hard settled into place. Not panic, not fear, resolve. "This," I said, standing up slowly as the morning sun hit the ruins of my gazebo, "is war." The hours after the renovation team attack were a blur, not because time moved fast, but because every minute felt thick and heavy, like wading through mud after a storm. Our front yard looked like a small tornado had chosen us and only us, sawdust everywhere, splintered beams. The old lilac hedge nothing but stumps and shredded roots. The garden path lay crooked where the workers had ripped up the lights. And the gazebo. God, the gazebo. Emily refused to let Caleb outside to see it. She pulled him into the living room, turned on cartoons, and tried to keep her voice steady every time he asked what was going on. I walked around the yard slowly, filming everything. Not for drama, not for social media this time, for evidence. The police had already told me, twice, that this was a civil matter. But I knew better now. Karen was counting on that phrase. She was using it like a shield. And the only way to fight someone hiding behind a shield was to build a bigger one. I was halfway down the walkway when Emily stepped onto the porch. She wasn't crying anymore. She'd moved past that. Now she looked afraid, really afraid. "Lucas," she said quietly, "someone's at the driveway." I turned. A car I didn't recognize was parked just behind the fence line. A silver sedan, not shiny or fancy, just there, watching. A man sat inside but didn't get out. Not Karen, not one of her uniformed puppets. This was someone new. "Stay inside," I told her. I walked halfway down the driveway. Enough to show I wasn't scared, but not enough to get near the car. The man inside raised his hands in a small, apologetic gesture and rolled down his window. "Mr. Wright?" he asked. "Yes, who are you?" "My name's Ron. I saw what happened." I frowned, staying cautious. "You a neighbor?" He nodded. "2 streets over, people talk. And when trucks with chainsaws start cutting into someone's property, people notice." "What do you want?" I asked. Ron leaned forward, his face earnest and tired. "I just want to warn you, Karen, she's not stupid. She's dangerous. She's been trying to push the HOA boundaries for years. Most people are too scared to stop her." His eyes drifted to the ruined gazebo. "And now she thinks you're her new project." I felt a cold weight settle in my stomach. "You're saying she's done this before?" "Not exactly like this," Ron said, "but close. Harassing people, faking citations, using emergency provisions that don't exist. She loves power, and she hates being told no." He hesitated, then added, "She'll escalate until someone stops her." Before I could ask more, he put the car in gear. "I shouldn't be here," he said. "She has people who watch the block." "Does she know you're talking to me?" "Oh, she'll find out," Ron said with a grim smile. "She always does." Then he drove away. Emily stepped out again. "What did he want?" "A warning," I said softly. "And I think it's one we should take seriously." Emily wrapped her arms around herself, staring at the destroyed yard. "Lucas, I don't feel safe anymore." I looked at her, really looked, and I realized just how shaken she was. The fear in her eyes wasn't about property damage. It was about our family, our son, the home we thought we were building. And that fear, that's what made me call the sheriff's department again. When the deputies came back, this time an entirely different pair, I met them at the driveway. "Officers," I said, "I need to file a report. This," I gestured around at the devastation, "this was intentional destruction of private property." The younger deputy took one long look and whistled under his breath. "Looks bad," he admitted. "Bad?" I snapped. "This is criminal." But the older deputy, the one with more gray than brown in his hair, opened his notebook slowly. "Sir," he said calmly, "we can document the damage. We can take photos. We can make a report." "And then what?" He chose his words carefully, too carefully. "Then the matter will go to civil court." I stared at him. "Civil court? They tore down part of my house. They vandalized my yard. They trespassed. And you'll be able to present all of that to a judge," the deputy said, trying to sound reassuring. Behind him, Emily stood with her arms around Caleb, who clung to her side silently. Something inside me broke, not despair, not hopelessness, resolve. I stepped toward the deputy, lowering my voice so Emily wouldn't hear the tremor in it. "So, you're telling me," I said slowly, "that if they do this again, if they come onto my property with chainsaws, if they threaten my family, there's nothing you can do?" He didn't answer for a long time. Finally, "Unless they threaten bodily harm, this stays civil." Karen had found the loophole. She wasn't stupid. She was strategic. The deputies took their photos and drove away, leaving us standing in a yard that no longer felt like ours. Emily placed a trembling hand on my arm. "Lucas, what do we do now?" I looked at the torn-up earth, the shattered gazebo, the ripped hedges. "What do we do?" I took a deep breath. "We fight," I said, "and not with chainsaws, not with shouting, not with fists, with a lawyer." And as I said it, I remembered the USB in my pocket, the map, the emails, the recording. I wasn't alone anymore. It was time to use it. I didn't sleep much the night after the second police visit. Emily didn't either. Every time the old house settled, every time a branch brushed against the siding, every time the heater kicked on, we both jolted awake. Caleb had nightmares. That part hurt more than anything. Around 5 in the morning, after another stretch of lying there listening to the house breathe, I got out of bed and made a decision. It was time to get help. Real help. Not deputies with tied hands, not concerned neighbors, not comments on a viral video. A lawyer. I'd already done some research after the concrete barrier incident. People online kept mentioning one name, Graham Lockwood, former prosecutor, specialized in property law, reputation for being as gentle as a grandfather, until the moment he stepped inside a courtroom. Then he became something else entirely. By 8 a.m., I was sitting in his office, and the moment I met him, I understood why people recommended him so fiercely. He was tall but not imposing, gray hair combed back neatly, wire-rimmed glasses perched low on his nose. He didn't look like a fighter. He looked like a man who had lived enough life to know when fighting was necessary. He gestured for me to sit. "Mr. Wright," he said gently, "I've read the email you sent last night, and before you say a word, I want you to know, I'm sorry this is happening." It was the first time in days someone had spoken to me with actual compassion. Not caution, not weariness, not polite neutrality. Compassion. I took a deep breath. "Thank you. I don't really know where to start." "Well," he said, folding his hands, "why don't you tell me what happened from the beginning?" And so I did. I told him about the white Audi, the boundaries, the fake paperwork, the concrete barriers, the surveillance at night, the mailbox tampering, the chainsaws, the collapsed gazebo, the officers shrugging it off as a civil matter, and last, the USB Ethan had given me. When I finished, Graham leaned back slowly, thoughtful. "Mr. Wright, forgive me for speaking plainly." "Please do. This isn't an HOA dispute." His voice softened, but his words hit hard. "This is targeted harassment, possibly conspiracy, possibly fraud, and in my experience, bullies like this only stop when the law forces them to." I swallowed. "So, what do we do?" He smiled, not kindly, but knowingly. "We build a case so airtight, even Karen Aldridge can't talk her way out of it." He opened a yellow notepad and clicked his pen. "Let's start with the evidence. You said you brought the USB. I handed it over. Graham plugged it into his computer, turned the monitor slightly so I could see, and opened the first folder. There were emails, dozens of them. Karen instructing board members to increase pressure. Karen ordering boundary enforcement without approval. Karen mocking the county zoning office. Karen bragging that the sheriff wouldn't intervene. Then he opened the audio file. It began with shuffling, chairs scraping the floor, murmurs. Then her voice, clear as day, cold, sharp, commanding. "He's a threat to order. If the law won't handle him, we'll bury him under a mountain of violations until he begs to leave." Graham paused the recording. Then he took off his glasses. "Well," he said softly, "that's what we call malicious intent." "Is that enough?" I asked. He looked at me dead in the eyes. "That, Mr. Wright, is enough to make a judge's eyebrows touch the ceiling." He turned to the next item, the fake boundary map. He expanded the digital file, scanning the metadata. Filed from a non-official device. Timestamp doesn't match county logs. Poor formatting. This wasn't just illegal. It was sloppy. He shook his head. "You'd be amazed how often arrogant people forget the basics." I let out a long breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "So, what happens next?" "Well," Graham said, "first, we file an injunction, an emergency one. We stop them from stepping foot on your property again, not even an inch." He began writing. "Second, we file a lawsuit. We go after her for damages, fraud, tampering, trespass, mail interference, property destruction, and emotional distress." He glanced over his glasses. "And yes, emotional distress is going to matter, especially with a child in the home." At the mention of Caleb, something in my chest tightened. Graham continued. "Third, we bring this recording to the county prosecutor. This isn't just civil. This borders on criminal conspiracy." I opened my mouth to respond, but he lifted a hand. "And fourth, we build momentum. You said your video went viral?" "It took off faster than I expected." He smiled. "Good. Public pressure matters. Judges read the news. Prosecutors listen. Sunlight is a powerful disinfectant." He slid a thick stack of papers in front of me. "Now, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. The next few weeks will be hard. Karen will push back. She'll get ugly. She might even try something desperate." He paused. "But the difference now is that you won't be standing alone." For the first time in days, I felt something other than fear or anger. Relief, real relief. I shook Graham's hand. "Thank you." "You'll thank me," he said. When she's standing in front of a judge, wondering how her little empire collapsed, he gathered the documents. "I'll file everything today. You go home. Be with your family." I left the office feeling lighter, stronger, prepared for whatever fight Karen had planned next. But even with a lawyer, even with the evidence, even with the truth on my side, I had no idea just how explosive things were about to get, because Karen wasn't done, not even close. The county courthouse didn't look intimidating from the outside, just an old brick building with too many windows and not enough parking. But the moment we stepped inside, I felt the air change. A courtroom doesn't smell like fear or tension. It simply holds them, quietly, like a deep breath waiting to be released. Emily walked beside me, fingers laced through mine. Her grip was firm, but I could feel the tremor in it. I didn't blame her, I felt it too. Caleb stayed home with her sister. There was no way I'd let him witness what was about to unfold. Graham Lockwood, our attorney, walked in front of us with easy confidence. Not cocky, not showy, just steady, like a man who knew the weight of truth and how to carry it without shaking. Across the room sat Karen Aldridge, dressed in a sharp white suit that made her look like she was the one presiding over the hearing. Her posture was proud, chin high, hands folded neatly on the defense table. She didn't glare at me, she didn't sneer. She just watched with a faint amused tilt in her head, as if this entire proceeding was a mild inconvenience to be swatted aside. She truly believed she couldn't lose. Then the judge entered. Judge Beatrice Lund had the kind of presence that quieted a room without raising her voice. Her robe flowed around her like she was carved from stone. She settled into her seat, adjusted her glasses, and looked at the papers before her. "Let's begin," she said simply. Graham stood first. His voice was calm, deliberate. "Your Honor, this case is about more than a boundary question. It is about falsified records, harassment, property destruction, and a systematic attempt to force my clients out of their home." Karen's attorney rose to object, but the judge motioned for Graham to continue. He clicked a remote, and the courtroom projector lit up. The first slide showed the official county zoning map, cleanly color-coded, time-stamped, documented, completely irrefutable. "This," Graham said, "is the real boundary map." Then he clicked again. Up came the forged one, Karen's map, sloppy digital lines, new borders that magically swallowed our property whole, a fake committee stamp, and metadata showing exactly who created it. The name K. Aldridge. The air in the room shifted as if the building itself leaned forward to get a better look. The judge peered over her glasses. "Mrs. Aldridge," she asked, "did you create this document?" Karen lifted her chin. "That is a board-issued boundary update. As president, my approval is—" "I asked," the judge said firmly, "if you created it." Karen hesitated for the first time. Before she could speak, Graham continued, pulling up county server logs that clearly proved no such boundary request was ever filed. The judge's eyebrows tightened into a single line. Graham then opened the folder containing dozens of emails Ethan had given us. The projector filled with Karen's written words. "We need to increase pressure. He'll fold eventually. We can control the narrative. Start citing violations the moment the fence goes up. We'll make it so miserable he begs to leave." Karen's lawyer scrambled to object again, but the judge shut him down with one sharp glance. Then Graham clicked on the audio file. Karen's voice filled the courtroom, sharp, cold, dripping with arrogance. "He's a threat to order. If the law won't handle him, we'll bury him under a mountain of violations until he begs to leave." The room went still. You could hear every breath, every heartbeat, every inch of Karen's composure cracking. She shot to her feet. "That recording was private. It's taken out of context." "Sit down," the judge said. Karen sat, but her eyes burned with disbelief. Her certainty, her arrogance, her imagined untouchable authority, every inch of it was unraveling. Next came the photographs, the mail forwarding fraud, the surveillance car parked by our fence at night, the concrete barriers, the chainsawed hedges, the shattered gazebo, the uprooted lights, the live stream of the renovation team ripping through our yard. When the video played, Emily reached for my hand. My throat tightened. Watching it again made everything feel fresh, raw. When the footage ended, the judge leaned back in her chair for a long moment, eyes closed, as if weighing the full weight of what she'd seen. Then she opened them and spoke. "Mrs. Aldridge," she said, addressing Karen directly, "did you at any time believe you had legal authority to expand your HOA's boundaries onto this plaintiff's land?" Karen straightened her blazer, preparing herself. "Yes," she said confidently. "Absolutely." The judge nodded slowly. "That," she replied, "is the most alarming sentence I've heard in this courtroom all year." Karen's expression faltered at last. The confidence drained. The tight smile collapsed. and the ruling came down like a gavel to the bone. Karen Aldridge is found liable for willful fraud, falsification of public documents, property destruction, mail tampering, conspiracy, and abuse of authority. Karen's eyes widened. The judge continued. The HOA is to be placed under temporary receivership. All board activity is suspended pending a full audit. A pause. And damages awarded to the Wright family total $1,200,000. Graham didn't move. Emily covered her mouth. My breath caught, but the judge wasn't done. Mrs. Aldridge, she said evenly, you are hereby remanded into custody pending criminal review. Karen stood up, trembling. You can't do this, she hissed. I was protecting the community. I was preserving standards. The bailiff placed handcuffs around her wrists. Her voice cracked. I was protecting order. They escorted her out as she struggled to regain any shred of control. But it was over. Utterly over. When the door shut behind her, you could feel the room exhale as one. Graham turned toward me and placed a steady hand on my shoulder. It's done, he said softly. You got your life back. But even then, standing in a courtroom where justice had finally been served, I knew the story wasn't finished. There was still the part that came after, the part where we rebuilt what she tried so hard to take away. And that story was just beginning. The house felt different after the verdict, not louder, not quieter, just lighter, as if the walls had finally stopped bracing for impact, as if the land beneath us had released a long, painful breath it had been holding since the day Karen first appeared in her white Audi. Emily and I stood on the porch that next morning, holding cups of coffee that went lukewarm in our hands. The sunrise spread across the hillside in soft gold, the same way it had the day we moved in. But now it felt earned, like the land was welcoming us properly, without shadows watching from the road or threats hanging over the fence. Caleb shuffled outside, still in his pajamas, rubbing his eyes. Dad, is she gone? I crouched, placed a hand on his shoulder, and nodded. Yeah, buddy, she's gone. He didn't ask anything else. Kids understand far more than adults give them credit for, especially fear. Emily pulled him close. We're safe now, she whispered, and for the first time in weeks, she didn't sound like she was trying to convince herself. By mid-morning, the contractors Graham recommended began arriving. Real contractors, not the fake improvement team Karen sent with chainsaws and forged orders. These were older guys, steady hands, quiet voices, respectful in a way that soothed the entire property just by standing on it. A broad-shouldered man named Marco got down on one knee beside the shredded lilac hedge. This old thing's been here a long time, he murmured. It was my uncle's, I said. Marco nodded thoughtfully. We'll get it back. He didn't say it to comfort me. He said it like a promise carved into stone. Over the next week, the yard slowly began stitching itself back together. New hedges, new pathway lights, fresh soil, stronger beams for the gazebo. Emily picked the paint, deep ocean blue, because she said it reminded her of calm after a storm. Even the septic system, damaged during Karen's rampage, was dug out and replaced. Every nail driven into the new framework felt like we were reclaiming something piece by piece. One afternoon, while I was helping Caleb unwind a stubborn garden hose, a familiar car pulled into the driveway. Ethan stepped out holding a clipboard and a sheepish smile. He looked older than he had a month ago, same age, but heavier with experiences he never asked for. Hey, Mr. Wright, he said. Just call me Lucas, he nodded. Lucas, I'm with the oversight team now. You know, the one the court appointed. Thought I should stop by. Emily came onto the porch and gave him a small wave. Ethan waved back, then looked around at the repaired yard. It's bad, he said quietly. The HOA books, the internal emails, old complaints, stuff she hid from everyone. None of us realized how deep it went. He paused, eyes drifting to the freshly painted gazebo. She scared everyone, even the board members who didn't like her. She built this machine, and people stayed quiet because it felt safer than getting crushed. He handed me a stack of documents, drafts for new, simple HOA guidelines. No annexations, no emergency powers, no surprise citations, just normal stuff, trash pickup and sidewalk repairs. The way it should have been. I thanked him. He nodded once and said, "You helped all of us, whether we ever say it out loud or not." And then he left, leaving the air a little lighter. A few days later, the local paper ran a story on the court ruling. Then a regional TV station picked it up. Before long, websites known for covering absurd HOA disasters were contacting Graham for comment. The articles didn't mention my name beyond initials. That was Graham's doing. But they did name Karen. Every detail of her downfall spread across the county like wildfire. People learned about the forged map, the harassment, the collapse in court. Then something else emerged. Something none of us expected. Her psychological evaluation. According to the documents, Karen suffered from obsessive control tendencies, rooted in deep, unresolved trauma from losing her adult son in a hit-and-run accident years earlier. The accident happened in a neighborhood with no oversight, no cameras, no patrols, no order. And that was the word that appeared most in the report. Order. She believed order kept people safe. She believed order prevented chaos. She believed order was the only way to stop the world from hurting her again. I read the evaluation twice. Emily read it once, then quietly set it down. She looked at me. "Do you feel sorry for her?" I took a long breath. "I understand her," I said, "but understanding doesn't mean forgiving." Emily nodded and leaned against me as the breeze moved through the mended hedges. Over the next week, neighbors began showing up one by one. Some came with casseroles, some with wine, some with quiet apologies. An older couple brought a handwritten card. "Thank you for standing up. We were scared to." I kept that card. I still have it. The HOA shrank almost overnight. Board members resigned, others stepped in, the charter was rewritten from the ground up. No more power grabs, no more intimidation, no more emergency provisions. Just a neighborhood again, not a kingdom. When the last contractor packed up his tools and drove away, the property felt whole, better than whole. It felt defended, by truth, by law, by our own stubborn refusal to be bullied out of what was ours. One evening, Emily and I sat on the new porch swing, swaying gently as the cool air moved up the ridge. Caleb was playing in the yard again, really playing, laughing like he used to. Emily rested her head on my shoulder. "I haven't heard him laugh like that in weeks," she whispered. "It's good to hear," I said. The sun dipped low, crickets began their nighttime chorus, and for the first time since we moved in, the peace felt real. "This is home now," she said softly. And I knew she was right. A year passed before I even realized it. Time has a strange way of moving after a long fight. It doesn't rush, it doesn't drag. It just heals quietly, like a steady hand bandaging something you didn't notice had been bleeding. The property looked different now, better, safer, ours. The new gate had gone up last month, wrought iron, tall and sturdy, with clean brass accents that caught the sunlight in a way that made the whole driveway glow. Emily said it looked a little dramatic, but I liked it. It felt like a line in the sand, a promise made of metal. Across the top, in strong lettering we chose together, it read, "Private property, no HOA, no nonsense." Emily raised an eyebrow at the phrase "no nonsense." I told her it was my polite version of what I really wanted it to say. She rolled her eyes, but I caught her smiling. In the evenings, when the cicadas hummed and the breeze carried the smell of cedar and cut grass, I found myself walking down to that gate just to look at it, at the quiet road beyond, at the curve of the hill, at the stretch of land we almost lost because one person thought her will mattered more than the law. The house behind me had changed too. The new hedges had filled in, the repaired walkway curved gently past the garden lights, and Caleb's swing set, rebuilt by a neighbor who insisted on helping, stood strong and level, squeaking softly when the wind nudged it. The land had its voice back, its peace, its heartbeat. Every now and then the local paper still called, asking if I wanted to comment on the HOA case or the results of the federal audit. Apparently, the audit uncovered years of Karen's creative bookkeeping, thousands of dollars in community development that somehow turned into private decor, travel, and personal expenses. Most days, I let the calls go to voicemail. We hadn't gone through all of this to stay in the spotlight. We'd done it so we could sit on our porch in the evening and listen to nothing more dramatic than wind in the trees and a kid laughing in the yard. One weekend, Emily suggested we host a barbecue. Not a statement, she said, not a victory party, just neighbors, real ones. So we did. We cleaned the grill, strung a few extra lights along the fence. set out folding chairs and old wooden benches that had been sitting in the shed since before we moved in. People came. Marco showed up with a tray of sausages and a grin. The older couple from down the road brought warm bread wrapped in a dish towel. A couple of the new HOA board members came too. Plain clothes, lowered shoulders, no clipboards, no binders, just people. Ethan arrived a little later than the others, parking his car at the base of the drive and walking up with a covered dish in his hands. "Potato salad," he said. "Figured there's always room for more of that." I laughed and clapped him on the shoulder. "I'm glad you're here," I told him, and I meant it. He looked around the yard, at the gazebo, at the kids running through the grass, at Emily, at the grill. "You know," he said, "I wasn't sure how this would all shake out. But seeing this," he nodded toward the house, "feels like the right ending." We ate as the sun slipped lower. The air cooled, carrying music and conversation from one end of the yard to the other. Caleb ran around with two neighbor kids, his laughter brighter and freer than it had been in a long time. At one point, he trotted over, cheeks flushed and eyes heavy. "Dad," he mumbled, crawling up into my lap, "are we going to stay here forever?" I looked out across the property, the gate, the trees, the blue-painted gazebo, the lights glowing soft along the path. "Yeah, buddy," I said, "we're staying." The evening eased into night. One by one, folks said their goodbyes and Juan headed down the driveway, waving as they passed through the gate. I walked a few of them down, hand resting for a moment on the cool iron as I closed it behind them. The road beyond was quiet. No white Audi, no strangers patrolling, no concrete barriers, just darkness and stars and the soft curve of the hill. When I turned back toward the house, the porch lights were glowing, warm and steady. Emily was gathering plates. Caleb had finally surrendered to sleep on the couch inside, sprawled sideways like only kids can. I stepped in and closed the door gently behind me, not in fear, not in defense, just the way a man closes the door of his home at the end of a good day. Our home, our land, our life. The storm was over, the fight was behind us, and now, at last, it was time to do the simplest, most powerful thing of all: live.